Bruchim Chabayim. Welcome to Chapter 23, the Piel verb pattern. Turn with me to page 255 in your textbook, and I want to note some things about the vocabulary as you look at them. The verbs, as always, are listed with these periods between the radicals or the stem letters. And in the cases that I have asterisked, notice that bakash, barach, dabar actually only occur in the Piel, and there is no cal form of these verbs. So it's actually bikesh, beirach, diber. Whereas shabar has the cal form, which they call pa'al, and it has a Piel form. The cal means to break, the Piel means to smash or destroy. Shalach in the cal means to send. Shalech or shaleach, set free, send away. Count in the Piel, safar in the cal means to count, and sifer in the Piel, recount or tell. So some verbs have both cal and Piel forms, others have only Piel forms. You ought to note that. Now, starting here, the textbook talks about the 7 verb patterns that occur in Hebrew. And I want to call to your attention the X chart, which is a part of the Brain Honey materials that you're provided for this week. And we're going to look at that right now and review that chart. The top of the Hebrew verb X chart looks like this. On the left column, you get the stems, nafal, piel, pual, and so on. In the middle, you get a column for the perfect tense forms. And the right is called all the rest. That means that all of the other forms of these verb stems are covered by that column. The imperfect, the infinitive construct, the infinitive absolute, the participle, the jussive, the cohortative, and so on. So all the rest covers every form of this verb stem except the perfect. And the 7 major stems that your textbook just referenced are the cal, nifal, piel, pual, hifil, hafal, and hit pael. The X chart includes only the non-cal stems. So cal is the only stem that is left off of the X chart because there's no need to learn its peculiarity since it's the standard form that everybody learns. Characteristics of the perfect conjugation will be listed in this column, and the characteristics of all the rest in that column. Now that brings us to chapter 23, the Piel, and the textbook authors have chosen to introduce the active stems, the Piel and the hifil, before introducing the passive stems, nifal, pual, and hafal. So I want to call your attention to what's characteristic of the Piel. The reason for this chart is there are many forms, many vowel variations, but this chart identifies what doesn't change. The key characteristic that is kind of like the common denominator for that verb stem. Well, in the perfect, the common denominator for the Piel is to have a hierarch under the first radical. So here's our first radical, and a hierarch under it, and a dagesh forte, in the second radical. That's the key characteristic in the perfect. So Piel, hierarch, dagesh. In all the rest, the key characteristic is whatever the preformative is, whether it's an aleph, a tav, a yod, a mem, or so on. The vowel under that preformative is a shavah. The vowel under the first radical is a patach, and the second radical again has the dagesh forte. So Piel in the perfect is hierarch dagesh. In the all the rest, shavah, patach, dagesh. And we'll see how that plays out in the lesson in just a minute. Turn with me over to page 256 and let's look at the model verb Piel pattern so that we can see how what I'm saying is the case. So the model verb in this case is the verb to speak. And notice that in the perfect tense, as we look down through all of these forms, that there's a hurric under the first radical, and there's a dagesh in the second radical. Debarti, debarta, debart, diber, dibera, dibart, dibarnu, dibartem, dibarten, and diberu. In every case, hurric dagesh. Isn't that great? That's the beauty of the X chart. Now, pay attention to all the rest, and let's see if we see the same kind of consistency. In the imperfect, you get a hatef patak, which is a form of the shava, so it still counts as a shava. Patak under the first radical, dagesh in the second. That is the expected form that we're looking for in, oops, let's get down to where I was. In the all the rest. So coming back to our textbook, Shava Patak Dagesh, all the way down through the imperfect, it's the same. In the participle, Shva Patak Dagesh, the whole way through. In the imperative and the infinitive, when there is no preformative, there's no Shva, but the rest of the characteristics are there. Patak Dagesh, Patak Dagesh. And if there is a preformative, it will have the characteristic Shva. Okay, so the key thing here is to learn the X chart characteristics so that regardless of which verb you're looking at, you can spot these and immediately identify which stem this verb is in. Now let me come back over to my PowerPoint. And next I want to talk about the uses of the Piel. I've given you this information in Brain Honey, and this information shows up here under point 1, page 255. Notes that the Piel pattern stem often expresses intensification. And I'm giving you additional information that will supplement and fill out what you're learning in the textbook. So what I've done in my copy of the text, I just wrote this information here in the side. I wrote it in a shortened form, and I'm going to go over this information with you now. So intensification, the Piel often intensifies the sense of the cow. Shabar means to break. In the Piel, it means to smash. So we've moved from simple breaking to more intense form. Secondly, the Piel can be used for repetition. For example, the verb na'af in the cow means to commit an act of adultery, whereas in the Piel it means to commit adultery repeatedly. Sometimes the use of the Piel for repetition is also called a frequentative or an iterative. All three of those terms mean the same thing. The third use of the Piel is as a factative. The word factative means causing a state of being. And this use of the Piel occurs primarily with verbs that describe a state of being in the cow, like to be holy or to be sick. So the verb kadash in the cow, which means to be holy, in the Piel, kidesh, means to make holy or consecrate. Chala in the cow means to be sick, but chile, to make sick, or chila, to make sick. So intensification, repetition, and factative use. Fourth and final use is the denominative use. A denominative verb is a verb created from a noun or adjective, and we do this all the time. Some of the most recent denominatives in English are email and text. Little older ones would be like phone, phone me. I've given examples here. A nest, we talk about to nest. A stone, you may stone someone, and so on. So most denominative verbs occur in the Piel and have no cal form. So the word davar, to word or to speak, diber. Word dust, afar, but to dust or throw dirt is ifer, or iper, sorry, and there's no cal form of that. So as I mentioned previously, I've written these 4 uses of the Piel here on the side of my text in page 255, and you will be expected to know these on the grammar reviews and for the test. Now, on the next page of your textbook, you have the model verb, and then on page 257, you get information about how to recognize the Piel pattern. I've already given you the X chart information that I have here on the side of my text, which I think is the most significant information for recognizing the Piel pattern. However, the textbook does point out some important characteristics. Let me call your attention specifically to number 1 here. That is, if the middle letter of the root radicals is a guttural, aleph, hey, chet, ayin, or resh, it cannot take a dagesh. Gutturals reject the dagesh. And in that case, the textbook says you recognize the Piel by its vowel rhythms. Well, that's not quite as helpful as the information that I'm providing here on the side. Specifically, because the guttural rejects the dagesh, it causes the vowel preceding the guttural to lengthen. So just take a look at this example that I've got here on the side. Dibarti, I spoke. The bait, the second radical, has the dagesh forte as expected. With the verb barak, the second radical is a resh. Resh is a guttural and rejects the dagesh. So it causes the hirik to lengthen to a tsere. It's almost as though the dagesh bounced out of the resh down to the line, and now you have 2 dots down there that make a tsere. That's not actually what happened, but that's maybe a helpful way to think of it. Okay, so anytime you have a guttural in the second radical position, the dagesh forte will be rejected and cause what's called compensatory lengthening. It will compensate by lengthening the preceding vowel. The other point that I wanted to make here is number 4. And the textbook notes that in the participle of the Piel pattern, the 3 root letters are preceded by the signal letter meme with a shava under it, which is of course what we'd expect because of the all the rest pattern. You might want to add to your textbook that meme is the preformative, that is the letter that's added to the stem, for all of the participial stems except the cal and the fowl. Let me clarify that. All participle stems except the cal and the fowl. So the nafal preformative will be a noon. The piel, the pual, hitfil, hafal, and hitpael forms will all take a meme preformative. Now let me just quickly connect what I've just said with the material you see in Brain Honey here. I was just talking about page 257 and gave you this information about the dagesh forte being rejected when the second radical is guttural, examples, and the preformative or prefix for participles is main. So that's the same information you have there. Also, I skipped and should have covered this. Page 256, there's some terminology changes I don't refer to command forms, I refer to imperatives because all other Hebrew grammars call them imperatives. I also ask you to cross out the word regular infinitive and replace it with construct, and emphasis infinitive and replace it with absolute, because those are the standard terms: infinitive, construct, infinitive, absolute. All right, well, now I encourage you to work on the assigned exercises. Let me just say that if you haven't been doing the exercises a section at a time and then going back to check the key, I would encourage you to do it that way rather than doing it a sentence at a time or an item at a time. It gives you a chance to self-correct in the process of doing the exercise rather than constantly depending on the exercise form itself.